Hi guys, it's Alexandra here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to sit down and share with you my non-spoiler book review for The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is a book that I got right as it was released, and unfortunately I've been really struggling with motivation to read, so it took me quite a while to get through. But I finally finished it the other day, and I figured better late than never to share my thoughts with you. So in this review, I'm going to share some things that I think would be helpful to know if you're looking at picking up the book, and then I'll share generally what the book is about without any spoilers, and then talk about some aspects of the book I really enjoyed and some aspects of the book that I think could have been better, and then I'll give you my estimated star rating as well as a would I recommend this book to you answer. Alright, so let's start with a few good things to know, just a little bit of comparison. So lengthwise, how does this particular novel compare to the individual novels from the original Hunger Games trilogy? And it is just a little bit longer. So according to Barnes & Noble, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes comes in at 528 pages, whereas The Hunger Games came in at 384. Catching Fire at 400 and Mockingjay also at 400. So a little over 100 pages longer than the books in the original trilogy, but by no means a super duper long book. The other good thing to know is that this is a prequel to the original Hunger Games trilogy. So this book is taking place several decades prior to the start of the original trilogy with Katniss. Okay, so what is this story about? Well, without going into spoilers, this book follows Coriolanus Snow, who we know becomes President Snow in the original Hunger Games trilogy as a young man in the Capitol. He and a group of his fellow students from school become mentors for the 10th annual Hunger Games. Each student is given a tribute from one of the districts and is basically tasked with the job of keeping them alive and viable in the Hunger Games for as long as possible. For all of the students, there's kind of this high stake because there's some prizes that could be won at the end of it if your tribute does well, as well as you just want your name to be strong and connected with having done well as a mentor in the Hunger Games. But for Coriolanus, this really is a weighty job because his family is having a difficult time, and he is really relying on making sure that he makes a good name for himself to ensure that his family has a bright and prosperous future. Of course, like anything with the Capitol, there are a lot of politics involved, even to the point where the tribute that you are assigned as a mentor is kind of a snapshot of how the Capitol higher-ups view you and your place in society. So for Corio, when he gets placed with the District 12 girl tribute, he definitely feels as though he's been slighted because his family name should mean a lot more to the Capitol than it apparently does based on the tribute that he got. Over time, Corio realizes that his tribute is so much more than he could have ever imagined, and that she's very crafty and intelligent and capable, and it makes him start to wonder and question what tactics does he need to take, or should he take, to ensure victory for him and his tribute. And he really has to call into question what he feels comfortable doing morally and ethically in order to establish himself within the Capitol and ensure that the Snow name lives on in this high status that it has for a very long time. Okay, so what are my general thoughts about this book as a whole? And for me, I feel like I did really enjoy the process of reading this book. It felt really nice to be back in the Hunger Games world and be reading about a character that we had heard about and read about from the original trilogy. So there was definitely an enjoyable process of reading this novel. Whereas with these characters, the war is still very fresh and still very much on their hearts and their minds, and the Capitol and the districts are still recovering from all of the fighting, and it's a very different vibe from the original trilogy, which is fascinating to me because I did always kind of wonder, how did the Hunger Games become what we see them as in the original trilogy? Because we do definitely see a different feeling between the 10th Hunger Games and I believe it's the 74th Hunger Games that we find in the first book in the original series. kind of tacking onto that, what are some aspects of the book that I really enjoyed? Well, I really enjoyed getting to see the capital only a few years after the end of the war, because it, like I said, has a totally different vibe from the capital that we encounter in the original books. It is very, very different, and I liked seeing that because it felt like you were starting to see some of the changes and how the capital slowly was morphing into this very extravagant and over-the-top place to be, but we weren't there yet. It was really cool to see that. I also thought it was really interesting to see the Hunger Games without all of this super advanced technology, because in the original books there are trackers and you can hear everything that the people are saying, and you can see the game makers really playing a game with the tributes, and it's very different from that with this 10th Hunger Games, but you start to see some of those well-known aspects of the games being put in place, and I really liked that aspect a lot. I also just in general liked that there seemed to be quite a few connections between the original books and this book, and you could kind of start to piece together some characteristics of this world and even kind of touch on possibly how things that we saw happen in the original trilogy ended up happening, like what took place before that led up to that. I do like that we got to see more of the Snow family, so more than just President Snow, Coriolanus Snow, because obviously we know that he had to come from somewhere, that he had a mom and a dad, and we get to see other people in his life, and I do think that that was also a very interesting aspect of this story. For this next part, I want to talk about some of the aspects of this book that fell a little bit short for me. Obviously, this whole review is just my personal opinion. You could feel totally different than me, and that is perfectly okay, but I just wanted to share some of my thoughts and feelings on pieces of the book that I didn't feel were as strong as maybe they could be, and some thoughts that I had about how they could be stronger. Okay, so the first thing that felt a little bit off was the pacing. The book is essentially broken into 3 parts, if I remember right, and I'm sure that the author very intentionally spent the amount of time that she spent on each part, but for me, there was one part of the story that I felt deserved a little bit more screen time, so to speak. And the part that I really wished had more time in the book was the actual Hunger Games part of the story. I wanted to know more about the happenings in the arena, because this Hunger Games felt so different from the ones that we'd seen in the original books. I just wanted more. I wanted to see it unveiled. I wanted to see how the tributes had to interact and work together in this very different setting than what we have seen in the past. I do kind of think that there could have been some merit in switching perspectives on and off throughout this section, and it might have even helped the whole book to have switched perspectives from our main characters, just to get the different viewpoints of the events that were going on. But in particular, in the section where the Hunger Games are actually taking place, I think it could have been really helpful to have Coriolanus's point of view and then also switch to his tribute, Lucy's point of view, because there's so many things that we miss in the arena because of the nature of this particular Hunger Games, and I found myself wanting to know what she was thinking and what the other tributes were thinking, and I didn't get that in this case. And I know it's a book about Corio, but I don't know, I felt like that section was a little weaker than I wanted it to be and less immersive because I wasn't actually like in the arena with any of the tributes. So take that for what you will. Another thing with the pacing is that in the last section of the book, I felt like things for the most part were moving along at a clip that made sense for the events that were unfolding, but you get to the very, very end, like the last, I don't know, 20 pages or so, and within a matter of 3 pages, everything is kind of upset. The apple cart is upset. And I don't know, sometimes I really like those quick changes where everything is spun on its head and you're headed in a totally different direction. But I wasn't sure that this spin I just didn't like it. Like, I did not like how that ended. It felt very much like an easy way out for how these different characters' relationships ended or were broken, and it wasn't as satisfying, I guess, as I would have wanted the ending to be. But, you know, you may feel very differently than me. Basically, there were just a few things that I never quite understood the motivation for why the characters did what they did. It felt very surface level, so when everything sort of changed up and went in a very different direction, I thought, why? Why are they doing that? I never felt that deep seed of reason behind it, essentially. Another aspect of the story that kind of left me feeling all over the place during the course of the book as a whole is just my feelings towards our main characters. So we have basically three main characters. We have Coriolanus Snow, we have Sejanus Plinth, and we have Lucy Gray. Of the three main characters, Lucy was really the one character that I felt pretty consistent feelings towards. I thought she was really interesting, and even if she was a bit strange, I liked her quirkiness, I liked her character. I liked her outlook on life. So I liked Lucy a lot and felt very consistent towards her. But when it comes to Coriolanus and Sejanus, I just felt very up and down with their character and their actions and just the motivations behind what they were doing. To make sure I say this right, essentially, with Sejanus, there were times where I really liked his character because he was kind of this outsider in the capital, so you got a different perspective on the things that were going on with the Hunger Games, and I really did like that aspect of his character. And for the most of the book, he was great. Like, I enjoyed whenever we were seeing him interact with other people, but kind of towards the end of the book, he started to make decisions that I just found to be kind of silly. Like, I could kind of see why he was making the decisions that he made, but then I think about it again and I'd be like, would somebody in this situation, would Sejanus in this situation really make that decision? Because that seems like a ill thought out choice, or maybe a very uncharacteristic type decision. But I hope that kind of gets my point across, that I liked Sejanus, but it was just kind of an undulating feeling. He made decisions that didn't always fit with the vision of this character that I had kind of built and constructed for me during the story. So there's that. Then with Coriolanus, I feel like my thoughts about his character are fairly similar to my thoughts about Sejanus, but my biggest frustration with him is that I don't feel like we ever got the real reason as to why he felt the way he felt about the Hunger Games and capital politics. We see Coriolanus Snow in the original trilogy as the president, and he is sick and twisted and sadistic, and he's got this really dangerous viewpoint of the Hunger Games and of capital politics. And I really thought that in this story we were going to get that deep-seated reason or the catalyst as to why he felt the way that he felt, that something had to have happened in his life that made him think and feel and do the things that he did as an adult. And I think there were times that we got close to uncovering that, but we never quite fully dug up all that dirt and really focused in on why he ended up the way that he ended up as an adult. And so that was a frustrating point for me, because that's what I wanted out of this novel as a whole. It was to really figure out what made him into the person that he was. I feel like we got close, but it seemed to come back to this, like, this is how I grew up, or like the districts must be kept in check kind of mentality. And it was sort of just like, oh, he was raised that way, which I understand is a reason that somebody ends up the way that they end up, but I feel like there's more to it that we didn't really get, and I wanted that. I wanted to see how growing up in the capital and what they were teaching in school and what his family was saying, how that affected him and his thought process, but I also felt like there needed to be or there is something else that really affected him as a young man that shaped that. And I think there are things that happen in the story that could possibly be those events or that event, but none of it felt strong enough, or I didn't see the emotional response from Coriolanus that would have led me to believe that that was the event that really caused that skewed viewpoint for him as an adult. So basically, this is what I wrote down when I got done. I said, so basically he doesn't like the districts and is a supporter of the Hunger Games because that is what he was taught was right in his schooling in the capital. And I know that it isn't as simple as what I just said, and I do recognize that Coriolanus had certain biases, and I just don't think that they were fleshed out enough for me. Like, I really started to pull for Coriolanus, and I was just feeling like, man, I'm going to be devastated when this thing happens, because he really had some redeeming qualities in himself. And I don't know, I didn't quite understand, like with Sejanus, why he made some of the choices that he made, why he connected himself to some of the people he connected himself to. Okay, so rant over about the characters. And I don't want that to sound negative. Those were just thoughts and feelings that I had as I was reading, and especially after I finished up and was sort of deciphering my overall reading experience. There's one thing that I really think could have helped this story for me personally, and maybe solved some of the issues that I had with the character development, and that would have been the use of multiple perspectives. I think with a lot of these events that took place, I wish that I could have read it from Coriolanus's point of view and then read it from Lucy's point of view, or read it from Sejanus's point of view and then Lucy's and then Coriolanus's. And not that it needed to be repetitive, but I think that there could have been merit between switching between each of those people's perspectives, because each of them has a very unique outlook on everything that's going on, and I think it could have uncovered their character motivations a lot more easily if we'd been able to kind of get inside their heads. But because we had only Coriolanus's point of view, we never got to see how Sejanus was thinking, or how Lucy was thinking, or how their perspectives on the different events really was different, because it was all filtered through Snow. And that, I think if we had had different perspectives, I would have understood a lot of the characters' actions a bit more deeply. Okay, having said all of that, what star rating out of 5 would I give this book? I would probably, at this point in my reflection process, give it about a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Because I really did enjoy getting back into the Hunger Games world. I enjoyed the nostalgia, I enjoyed the connections. Even though the characters weren't perfect, I thought that they were interesting. I liked seeing the Capitol at a very different time in history. I liked seeing the Hunger Games at a different point in their development. I liked the cast of characters that surrounded our main characters. I actually wish we could have gotten more from them. They were quite interesting and entertaining. And yeah, there were some issues that I had with the pacing, and there were some issues that I had with the character development and uncovering the true motivations for why our main 3 did what they did. But I really enjoyed myself, and I think that that, does play a fairly big factor in my overall rating. And it wasn't a perfect book, but there were certainly merits to it, and I think that it has its rightful place within the Hunger Games world. And I hope that Suzanne Collins continues to write more Hunger Games novels and give us more perspective on the other people in the world, and maybe even different time points in the history. Okay, so then would I recommend it? And I think that the simple answer is yes. I would recommend that if you have enjoyed the Hunger Games books in the past, or you are interested in reading the Hunger Games books, that you go ahead and read this book. This is not a perfect book, but I think it has a solid place within the Hunger Games world, and that it does divulge a good amount of information about the development of the Hunger Games and capital politics and district politics. And I think it's helpful to kind of know, what did Panem, and in particular the capital, look like many decades before we meet Katniss and Peeta. And so I do think that it's a good book to read. I think that as long as you can say to yourself that this is probably not going to hit home for me the way that the original trilogy did, for a couple of reasons. One, it's not the same characters. Two, we aren't in the midst of this like pop culture phenomenon of the books and the movies. And three, there are certainly some aspects of the story that I think could have been a little stronger. I think that you will enjoy this. I had a really good time, and I'm glad I read it, and I think that it will enhance my experience of rereading the original books in the future, because I'll be able to really kind of compare and contrast how the world has grown and changed from this prequel novel to the first book, The Hunger Games. Alright guys, so that is it for my book review for The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. If you've read this book, let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comments below, or if you've made a video or a blog about your thoughts and feelings, link that below. I would love to watch or read and have a little discussion with you about your feelings towards this book. Again, I would recommend it. I don't think it's a perfect novel, but I think it has merit and that it is a really fun thing to read. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Also, hit the notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I post new content. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.